In the next 5 years, AI could eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs.
Coding developer jobs are going through a very tough time. There are going to be disruptions, but we are going to find that so much of what AI is fantastic at right now is the how, but not the why.
And what is your take on what makes really great tech?
This is one of the world's most valuable companies, and I don't like using any of it. I am more than happy to use an ugly interface and a bad experience if it solved a problem for me.
If you had to give some advice to non-technical founders, they're kind of really excited to try and do something with AI.
Just start. These things are very cheap to play with. The cost of code has gone to zero.
What's the dumbest AI product you've seen get funding?
Oh.
Welcome, Ian. You spent the last 15 years in AI. You have multiple head of AI roles, and currently you're the head of AI at Clue. So I wanted to ask you something. OpenAI have just said they'll reach AGI by 2029, and you said that this is BS. Can you tell us why?
Sure. Well, in specific, OpenAI's definition of artificial general intelligence is when they hit $100 billion in sales. That's when all of the IP rights and profit sharing that they have with Microsoft reverts back to them. So they've set this at a fiscal number, not a sense of research, not a sense of what the technology can do, not a benchmark. You can't look at any of the online benchmarks and say, oh, once this hits a certain percentage of the really hard tasks that we've set these things, now we've reached AGI. So I think that's one, a poor definition. But two, there's a great philosophical definition of BS by a guy named Harry Frankfurter. And it just means not caring about the definition, right? So you can say something and not care about whether it's true or false. That's literally the definition of BS. And my view is OpenAI, even Anthropic, all these other companies who are talking about AGI don't have a definition for it. They just say it because their investors want to hear it. It's a great way to drum up money. Total BS.
Sorry, just wanted to jump in and ask you, wasn't AGI supposed to be sort of indistinguishable from like human beings? So if you have a chat with AI, you wouldn't be able if it's a person or a robot or AI.
Yes, that is going back to the now fairly old thing called the Turing test. So Alan Turing, one of the great fathers of computer science, not just AI, posited a test where if you sat someone down and they were looking at a screen or a set of responses, and the person could not tell the difference between the responses they got from a human and the responses they got from a computer, you would eventually have a thinking machine, an intelligent computer. We've since refined that definition. It's a little bit easier to mimic what humans say in a way that we totally believe is not, representative of truly intelligent machines. So there have been refinements to the Turing test and other proposed alternates. But what I think is the core of what you're talking about is a lot of these definitions of AGI go back to an idea about, well, it is pretty much the same as a human intelligence. So even papers that have come out recently saying, let's measure AGI. Let's see if we can get to a definition of it. It all just goes back to, well, it's going to be like it's an average intelligent human. Mm-hmm. I have yet to see a good definition of an average intelligence, human with average intelligence. I happen to be good at some things. My guess is Anastasia and Simon, you are fantastic at certain things that I am not. And does that mean you're more intelligent, less intelligent? Somebody who's unbelievable at math, is that person less intelligent than one of our great poets? How do we talk about that? So at what point, just because the computer can write a poem and then do math, does that mean it's artificial general intelligence?
Yeah, great point. That.
Yeah. And on that, actually, I'm sure you are familiar with this report by HSBC, but I think at the end of last year, they said that OpenAI needs to raise 207 billion by 2030 to continue to be able to continue to lose money. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen with AI by 2030? Right? Because it's kind of difficult if they're not gonna make money even if they get 207 billion. Like what's next for them then?
Sure. Well, of course, prediction's hard, especially about the future. The current trends, I think, are interesting because they're showing there's a bit of a plateau. So there's a bunch of people that have put things on curves. To a rough approximation, and I'm doing a little violence to their ideas because these are rigorous people who have said sort of the amount of increase every time we see a new model version released has been getting smaller and smaller. So the jump from GPT-3 to GPT, did they call it 4? Or was that when we got O1? I think that might have been when we got O1, and then there was the various models, each one, and then from 5 to 5.1, and now we're at 5.2. The differences have been getting smaller and smaller. A lot of people will go back and say, oh, it's another AI winter. For people who might not realize, AI winter is what they called that time, 70s, 80s, early 90s, even some of the late 90s, when there just wasn't much happening in what was defined in the academic sense as studies in AI. Are we going to have another winter? My guess is probably not. It's probably going to get more and more interesting. There are going to be incredible applications. We've seen this come for coding because it's just such a great and very clear use case. Other use cases are coming, the legal profession, healthcare. There are just terrific applications where this can have a lot of ROI fast. And we'll probably see, at least I think we'll see applications that come in those specific industries. So huge leaps in legal tech, huge leaps in health tech, maybe even property and property management tech, because there's a lot there that's still old school and still done with spreadsheets or just keeping emails in a list. But
Yeah,
by 2030,
I saw actually on LinkedIn just recently you said doctors should be more scared of AI than nurses.
absolutely. I 100% believe it. If you think about when you go to the doctor, who do you spend more time with? Nurses, physician's assistants. Doctors come in and they're very highly trained, very specialized, because they run to a certain extent an algorithm when they show up. Here's what I believe you have. Here's how I treat it. Here's the fastest way to get through it. On to my next patient. The nurses have way more parameters to work with. They've got much more latitude in the way they have to deal with you. Is your family there? Do they have to worry about the visiting right or visiting hours and people who you're trying to get just basic things done? Are you taking your medication? Are you comfortable? They have so much more to worry about and take care of that is not part of just a standard algorithm, but they have to adapt to the human a lot more than a doctor might. This is not to say that current doctors are not fantastic with patients. You might happen to love your general practitioner, but if you have, as my wife did, wrist surgery, that doctor's got a very particular idea. I know the muscles that I'm working on. I know the result. I know this is what I need to do. The physical therapist, how are you doing? Do you have time to do these things, to do the recovery? Is the recovery working for you? I need to worry about your age. So to get back to the question, I think by 2030, we're going to see amazing verticalized AI. I don't think we're going to see AGI. I'm never going to predict the willingness of investors to throw money at something as big and as shiny as OpenAI. So my guess is they'll probably raise all that money that they need to keep losing money.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, I am much more attuned to the Anthropic version of this, which has really captured the enterprise world and is looking to be profitable pretty soon here. So I think there's going to be a race.
Yeah.
So it's sorry.
No, I just wanted to. Sorry, but before we move on,
Please.
We're fighting for your attention.
Go for it.
But I'm thinking because around 40 or 50% of S&P 500 right now is probably invested in AI. Can OpenAI come to government and say, "Look, guys, if you don't support us financially, because obviously they're not making profits, even if." By the way, that HSBC report said if everything goes well for OpenAI and they launch the ad successfully, they get Johnny Ive on board and so on and so on, that still means they will not be making money. So I wonder if they actually will ask government to start supporting them because the whole economy could be holding on to the success of OpenAI. What do you think about that?
I think your question is well stated and interesting. You said, can they? They're going to. They already are. I think the one to look at that's going to start that is the new president at Meta. This person is highly qualified. She has got a terrific background, but I believe Meta is playing very much on the relationship she has with the Trump administration to start the conversation. And the conversation is pretty easy. It's this: AI is a national security issue. Having AI that by some measure beats China is something that is an imperative to the future safety of the United States. To get there, we need to build data centers the size of Manhattan, maybe the size of Rhode Island. Maybe we need to pave all of Nevada with solar panels and data centers. And if we don't have the cash for that, the government should step in because it is a national security issue. They're definitely going to do that. You can see them already starting. Should they? I can get into my political views and my beliefs on what this is, but it's absolutely correct. You're right. 40% of the S&P is based on largely one company, NVIDIA, and the whole country right now is one gigantic bet on the future of AI. Like, our economy would not look like it does. It would not survive the, let's call them tribulations that we see if people weren't as bullish on AI being such an amazing technology. I think a recent study came out and said our GDP would be nearly flat if it weren't for AI spending. Now, when you introduce all of the volatility that has come from administrative decisions and international politics, I don't even think it would be flat. I think we'd be seeing something radically different. But we have all of this money being poured into AI. I think the last thing that the federal government, and this would probably be in any administration, would want to see is a sudden sucking of all that money out of the system and watching it go down. In COVID, we saw a massive bailout of the stock market, an incredible transfer of wealth to the U.S. stock market as, unemployment hit. I think it's like 14.3%. So I think there is right now this belief that even if there is a downturn in the bullishness on AI, that the government will step in to secure loans, to provide, just cash straight out in order to build data centers. So I think there's a really good chance that that is the path that we're going to see.
Hey guys, we're really hoping that you're enjoying this episode so far. And if you are, please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you really want to know more about who we are and what we do, go to buildinggreattech.com. Now let's go back to the episode.
Wow. Okay. So you are, so you're not anticipating a crash?
I don't think a bubble is going to burst this year. Like, I think it is clearly a bubble. I just happened to be in San Francisco this past weekend, and every billboard that you see is AI, and 90% of them have the word agent on it somehow. The agent for enterprise, secure your agents, personal agents, customer service agents. We are clearly in a state where the place that, generates so much of our technology innovation is focused on one particular thing. As I mentioned, I think there are still a number of really good use cases and industries for the application of AI that we're going to see. And as those come online, I think people's bullishness about AI will continue. What I think, though, is we're going to probably see a slowdown in a year, maybe 18 months, as those use cases aren't as clear and as apparent, and as companies struggle with the incorporation of AI into even the small things. So people operations and internal operations, not legal operations. Maybe some legal operations internally about, just getting option grants sent to people and filled out correctly as well. So I don't think this year we're going to see just a huge crash, but I do believe that maybe some form of deflating bubble will happen towards the 2027.
And just going back to your analogy of the differences between the doctors and the nurses, you're sort of foreseeing the application kind of at best is when there's really tight requirements over what is needed to be done, and then you feel like that's more likely to be a successful application, as opposed to a nurse where there's a kind of larger requirement for options of things that could happen. So they have to have a bit of a wider capacity to kind of flex. That's not, if I understand what you're saying there correctly, is going to be the best use case.
Yeah, that is a great way to state it. So AI from chatbots has proven itself very, very good at doing a number of things that are great at writing and describing things and giving you some information. The places where we see it being adopted the quickest, to my mind, are places where there is a clear answer. Code is terrific because it does a certain thing, and I know at the end if it did what I expected. Did the website load up? Did the model run a prediction? Did the system work? The doctors generally in the U.S. healthcare, and I know I'm hopefully speaking to people from a number of places that have seen it in different ways, have a very clear outcome, and they, perform a surgery or they do something, and it says like, all right, this is done. You prescribed the right medicine. The outcome is this: the person's heart rate went down, the person's cholesterol went down, the person's A1C went down, or it's in the right ranges, or the good cholesterol came up. Done. Great. You've done the right thing. The algorithm has given you back a feedback loop that says you did it correctly. Great. Keep doing that. AI calls it reinforcement learning. When a nurse walks into a patient's room, how do we know she did the right thing? The person might feel a little bit better, but the person may have a very hard situation. They have a long track of physical therapy to go through, or, in horrible situations, as that person is facing, a very different life because of some accident, because of some disease, and the nurse is there to help them work through that in a very short amount of time. So they're not going to get it right and know that they got it right. They do the best they can. They are fantastic at it. Also, here's a plug. If anybody's looking for a pretty decent path for a career in the future, is go into nursing. We have such a huge nursing shortage in the US, but I think this is why, is because the return to it has been tough, and we don't pay as well because you can't measure it as clearly as you can with a doctor. A heart surgeon, the person had a heart attack, they lived through the surgery, we're done. Now, that's not something that a robot, well, some robots can do. That's not something that AI or OpenAI can do right now. But OpenAI can provide a lot of, information, and we know if it's right. Is this what a doctor would do? Terrific. Stamp it as yes, and we say that was correctly done. That's how a lot of people use AI right now. As I'm writing code, it successfully updated a database. Terrific. It did what it was supposed to do, and I know the record's there, and it's done. Now I can say the AI did the right thing.
And actually, I was going to ask you earlier, but in terms of obviously replacing doctors, let's say, or lawyers, what's the situation with hallucinations, right? Because in some cases with long tail data, it could go up to 40%. I read somewhere that same is happening with agents. They have something on like impersonation or something like that. So how do we handle that on such important jobs, as being a doctor?
You're absolutely right. So these models, no matter how good they get, they still hallucinate. They still bring in information that they think might be correct, but might not be. Pennsylvania Pennsylvania is the state I live in, and we just saw a report that some surprisingly large number of briefs filed in front of the court had made up citations. So clearly they were using AI that just said like, oh, well, here, I'm citing the Cook versus Willison case in 1997 that found such and such. And somebody looks back and says like, that doesn't exist. Hallucinations are part of what we have in the system right now, and there's no way to just say you can expect to never have them without a big technological improvement. Now, I will say, very interestingly, there's a company called Thinking Machines. Mira Murati, the former CTO of OpenAI, has started this company in the news recently because they're losing some talent back to OpenAI. The talent wars, the numbers that are being thrown around, I wouldn't mind being part of these talent wars. I would, somebody was just like, hey, Ian, how about you cancel this podcast and come join me for $30 million? I'd be like, I see you guys. But that's not going to happen. Also, I wouldn't say no, or I wouldn't say yes, because this is fun. So they're losing talent. But thinking machines, one of the stakes they've put in the ground is they have gotten to the point where they can, or they believe they've gotten to the point where they can say they can make the outputs of these models deterministic. It's just a fancy way of saying it's the same every time. Meaning right now, when you open ChatGPT or Claude and you ask the exact same question the exact same way, you're not likely to get the exact same answer. The content's gotten to the point where it's pretty much going to be the same, but the style will be a little different. Maybe it's a little friendlier. Maybe it's a little more technical. But when you get into something and having these tools in production, those small differences matter. If you go in and use Claude just released something called Cowork. I was trying it out. I was like, hey, great, go to this folder of mine, organize some files, and give me a report back as to what you did. Well, the first time it couldn't find the folder. And then I was like, I'm pretty sure you have access. Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. I do have access. And, you work in a back and forth with a person through a chat window. That's fine. If you're attempting to be a surgeon's assistant right there and be like, am I allowed to cut this particular set of muscle? And like, yeah. Oh, hey, wait, no, I you're right. That's actually the wrong thing to cut. You can't do it. It's like the blue wire, the red wire, the ticking bomb. You don't get a second chance. The big way right now, and I suggest this for everybody who is looking to bring in AI, is to understand what right and good looks like at the end, and to build evaluations to make sure that the thing you're using produces results that way. Now, that means that there's a human in the loop. You have to design the evaluation to say, when this happens, I want this to happen, or when this happens, this is the outcome I'm looking for. Make sure it's documented, make sure it's clear, and then design tests, much like you have your development team writing unit tests, smoke tests, all of these types of things, integration tests to understand it did what it's supposed to do. You have to think about that for the output of these models as well. Did it have the outcome that I expect? Did it recommend these 4 things that I expect? Were all the citations real? So create a brief, read the citations, make sure you can check that they're real, and then you go through and have that happen. Those evaluations help minimize the hallucination. There's a lot you can do at the beginning with the context you give the models. You have to spend a lot of time working to make sure that the right information goes in and that it has the right guardrails when you are giving it prompts and context information. That can minimize it, but we are definitely not at the point where you can say, well, if I write the right prompt, then I'm done and no hallucination will ever happen.
I love that. Dario Amadei of Anthropic said, in the next 5 years, AI could eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs. So the unemployment rate could jump somewhere between 10 to 20%. What's your view on that?
That is a fantastic statement for somebody who is trying to raise money. Like, I cannot blame him for wanting to say that, my technology is so revolutionary that I'm going to wipe out half of the work that's out there. But I don't see any example of that. I don't see examples where technology has shown up and just simply been so universally beneficial that all these jobs are just completely wiped off the map. That is not to say that there won't be disruption. Coding developer jobs are going through a very tough time because people are trying to figure out, is this something that I can hire or buy instead of hiring another 5 junior developers? Do I need a systems architect because I think I can prompt ChatGPT well enough, or Claude Code? I can, use Claude Code and build my own apps. Does that mean I can just fire my dev team, or do I not just not need to hire them? There are going to be disruptions, but we are going to find that so much of what AI is fantastic at right now is the how, but not the why. Like, all those people still need to sit around to decide, what am I building today? Why am I choosing this feature? Why am I choosing this product market to go after? Why am I trying to solve a problem for podcasters or doctors or nurses or lawyers or, pipe fitters? Maybe there's a great way to do this in the skilled trades. Those questions still have to happen. There's tons of companies that have to make those choices every day. The AI doesn't know why or how those choices get made in terms of what has to get done today. It's just terrific at, here's the problem you gave me, and here's my suggestion for an answer. So There are a number of those jobs. I think management consulting is probably up for and is going through a huge shift. I think of management consulting as really um, overly verbose prompting with a really bad feedback loop, right?
Oh yeah.
Is management consulting was always just like, here's your deck on what to go do and what to go build. Please write me the check. And if you do it, great. If you don't, your fault. And you just never that's just a big, really long prompt. And then you just never follow up to see whether the system made what you expected.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of one of the big fours generating report for Albanian government for I think $500,000 almost dollars, and then it was I think they realized it was all AI generated. I mean, I don't know how they could do it and just be okay with that, but it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Somehow someone did. And I love, you know what, I loved your piece of context there, Ian, around why some of these statements are being made. It's around founders, and they're looking for kind of support.
Yeah,
advertising, they're selling confidence to investors to continue the money.
Well, as we speaking, because Davos is happening now, apparently today or yesterday, Dario Amadei actually said that they are 6 to 12 months away from AI replacing completely what the software engineers are doing. And also he said that AI is going to build then AI better than humans, which is going to be interesting.
AI is going to build AI better than humans. That one I lend some credence to. I think there's a fine line, and especially from people from Silicon Valley and the very notion that software solves a lot of pretty much all of your problems. If there's a problem you've got, we can build an app for it, or we can use software to automate it away. The role of developers is changing drastically, and I don't know what that's going to look like, and we all have to come to grips with it. We are just in this roiling bubble of uncertainty right now. So I absolutely believe that the software generation from these models is going to be at a level and speed that is going to radically rewrite what we do. I think there is still that room for understanding why. So as an example, I think one of the reasons that AI has had such an impact on junior level coding instead of the higher level coding is because what we get with experience and repetition is taste. And AI has no taste. It has no view on the world. It's got no sense of what's good or bad. It senses what you think is good or bad and how to respond to that. And junior developers who could be fantastic and terrific just haven't developed that yet. They've not seen enough to say, this is a great way to go about a consumer app. This is a great way to go about B2B SaaS that has to be integrated in a bank's back end. They just don't have that repetition, whereas senior folks do. So when you are writing code, the senior folks are not there to write far better code necessarily. They're there to write code that is going to work better, faster for the application that they've got. That said, that kind of information can be integrated pretty quickly. So I think he's possibly right. I am not going to bet against these guys. They've done amazing things and amazing technology. I can call out when it is advertising and marketing. That sounds less like marketing to me than I'm going to wipe out 50% of jobs. And AI, building better AI, I think that's entirely possible. That said, it's going to be, in my view, that people like Dario and Demis Hassabis are going to be able to describe what they want, and the AI, will know better what that means in terms of building AI. Right now, the translation from I have this in my head as a process that can work and as a thing that I want to see into code that does it, there's still obviously some bumps. There take some time and some repetition, but as the AI gets better, it's going to better understand what folks like that mean and what they are taking from the kind of initial insights that folks like Dario have. So I can see that coming pretty quickly.
Interesting. And there's online at the minute, there's lots of experienced developers kind of ripping the AI vibe coding, calling it bad. What's your take on that?
They are absolutely mistaken. If people are thinking, well, What I really need to do is be bespoke and be specific and just focus on the code. And it's better when I handwrite every line. They are missing the opportunity and they're going to be outpaced very, very quickly. They are going to write wonderful code. And for those people who want to write good code as the result itself, to just have good code, maybe they're correct. But take it as you will, sad fact, the outcome is companies the value of companies depends almost zero on the quality of code. Let me say this in a way that is not all mumbled. The correlation between company valuations and the quality of code is nearly zero. Uber wasn't a massive hit because the code base was clean and modular and worked well. And, Tesla, there are stories about just how crazy the code is, and, old Reddit threads about people who said, I used to work at Tesla. Let me describe for you just how crazy this code is that we have and what's still sitting back there. That didn't stop Tesla. So if vibe coding is producing a bunch of spaghetti code, but it works and it solves a problem, that's going to win out every day. And yes, somebody may have to go back and fix that. But I got to tell you what, these tools are going to be the things people use to go back and fix it very quickly. I will say this. I think there is a growing distinction between what everybody thinks of as vibe coding, which is I just open up an app and I say, build me a calendar application for my phone. And they just never come back to it. And that's all they tell it. Probably not going to work yet. Or it works, but it doesn't do exactly what you want. It's not as nice. It doesn't look like what you want. It's too slow. The use of proper context and documentation, what's called spec-driven development, where you spend all of your time up front. What does it do? How does it look? How does it make to feel? What are the technologies I want to use? All written down in text, plain English. Then that's given to the AI to help build from. I do that all day and have found tremendous success at creating code that has gone into production and works incredibly well. And in many cases, when I've chatted with people, is indistinguishable from good developer code. Mm-hmm. So there is this, hey, I just want a one-shot, build me a copy of Salesforce. And that's literally all you say to Claude Code. You're not going to get Salesforce out of the thing. Mm-hmm. That said, I want a CRM that's usable for a small company, blah, blah, blah. You go through all those details, you're going to get it pretty fast.
So if you had to give some advice to, say, non-technical founders that have something in their head, they're kind of really excited to try and do something with like AI and use some vibe coding, what would be your best advice for them for picking this up and just kind of getting running?
Just start. These things are very cheap to play with. You don't even have to get to the $20 a month account or subscription at something like ChatGPT. You can do it with smaller ones. Go out and try tools like Lovable, like Replit, and just see what you can get. The phrase that I hear a lot is the cost of code has gone to zero. The cost of writing code has gotten pretty much to zero. The implication of that I find interesting is the cost of throwing away code is also close to zero. So it used to be that you get halfway through a project and you're thinking, I've built this and it's worked out a certain way. To refactor all of this is going to take me forever. You're a non-technical founder and you're like, I just want to start. I want to see what this is going to be like. Try it out. See what works, see what doesn't, see where it works for you and what you have gaps in. That way you understand if you do need to go to somebody like a me or anybody else and say, I can use some help, then you can say, I know what I tried. It did this really well. I've got a great landing page. I've got some, great ways to capture emails and to save people to a CRM so I can follow up later. But it's not serving this other thing terribly well, or this functionality is not great. Then you've at least got a really good sense. And what you can do is then have a much more detailed conversation with anybody else. But that said, the more you play with this, the more you're going to realize, okay, this is how I have to describe it. The other thing I describe for anybody, and it's going to sound a bit like this is what developers have been doing forever, is write down what you mean. Write down what this is, your vision for it, and write down what it's got to do when it's working well. What does it look like when you have finished this and it's solving a problem and it's creating a result or it's doing certain things? Because the more you can provide to the tool that you're using, Replit, Lovable, Claude Code, Codex, Gemini, whatever it is, the more you can give that, and it doesn't have to be technical, it just has to be good and thought through, you are going to see returns 10 times faster than just giving it in inchoate, unspecified description. Like, I love CRM and I really want it to be tailwind purple. It's like, well, okay, great. You're going to see that everywhere. What is it for you that it has to do that is different and unique and is solving the problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, superb advice. And sorry, just quickly, no preference on the specific tool. You just said try a wide range. You don't have a favorite. You mentioned like Lovable, Base 44 is another one, I think, isn't it?
Oh, I think I happen to be, I think they're calling it Claude Pilled now.
Okay.
I build a lot of code with Claude Code. I think one of the truly genius things Anthropic is doing is they've said, we're not trying to compete with OpenAI for just the huge broad market of everybody. They have gone after the developer community and and this comes out the wrong way, the wannabe developer community, or those folks who know that they're trying to build but don't have the depth. Because it's easy to use, it's easy to install, but it does look a little bit more like a coding environment. So it's what's called the terminal, and you have to use it in a specific way. Although now, if you just download Claude Desktop, it works pretty well integrated that way. But you do have to be familiar with what GitHub is and does and what it means to check in code. So it's a little more specific. And that's why I find that one works really, really well for me. But I find myself going to other models, and I use an integrated development environment that has not only Claude Code in it, but another set of agents off to one side that I'll often break up. One I want writing code, one I want as a thinking partner and having questions and asking for ideas. But if you are just a terrific business person with a great idea and you're just trying to figure out, like, I don't know the first place to start, go to something like a Replit, a Lovable, and try it from there. A V0 I believe they call it the V0.dev, although they changed their name recently. V0.app, it may now be. Anyway, these are great places to, throw your money at and try it out. Spend $20, spend $200. It's going to be a much better return on saying, okay, I'm going to go get offshore developers. I've got to go through the hiring process, figure that out. Those are all great. We should possibly do that once you have a better idea and you've got something that's like, all right, great, here are the steps that I need. But you're never going to know what it's bad at until you've played with it yourself.
Great, nice.
And like in terms of like Lovable and Base 44, I constantly see online on LinkedIn stories that this founder, no skills, background in tech, they build like this 2 million RR application, and they're growing massively and so on and so on. But then when I dig deeper, is usually that they actually have the CTO or somebody with very specific technical background. That my question is, can somebody who doesn't know anything about coding and doesn't have the CTO using Lovable or platforms as such to build end-to-end something, a product that is going to be commercially viable?
That's a great question. And because those folks that have gone out to get the CTO have probably hit some bumps and they've said, all right, I tried to make something myself, but it doesn't do everything I want. Because again, like junior devs, they don't have the vocabulary to say, you want to be doing this, but on the back end, it has to have a couple of different databases to save these things. And it has to, you want it to be fairly slow. So you have to find something that sends messages pretty quick and it has to spin up. So let's talk about infrastructure. There's a vocabulary there that if you have it and you can explain it to the coding systems, like I happen to, when I, build apps on my own through Claude Code, I describe all of that and it says, oh, I get what you mean. The totally non-technical founder is not going to have that. These things are going to be great for initial MVPs. And I don't mean, that's one of the criticisms that people say with vibe coding. Oh, well, it's fine for a prototype, but you can't get to production. Well, to me, the difference between the MVP and production is not, this one's garbage and this one actually works. It's, can I prove that it solves a problem, which is where every entrepreneur should start? Can I make what's the smallest thing I can make to say I have solved the problem that I've gone out to solve? And these days, I can do that with code very, very quickly. Once it gets to the point, it's like, well, I need to be able to do this. If it's a consumer-facing tool, I need to be able to do this when 1,000 people are using it. Great. Now you need someone to talk about concurrency and latency and failover and all of these things. But that's once you've proven that you can solve the problem that you're trying to solve. And all you need for that is a very basic system that does what you need. I still love, there's those stories. There was a note-taking app, I believe it was called Fireflies, that was, you signed up into your Zoom and you turned on Fireflies, and the thing said, "Oh, Fireflies is now taking notes for your meeting." And it turns out it's actually a couple of guys just listening in, taking notes by typing out. They proved that way that there was demand for it. People loved having notes of their meetings. So they figured out how to automate that later on. I don't know that that's the best lesson to learn, other than they figured out a way to get a quick answer to a problem they thought was out there. People don't want to take their own notes. What if something else could do it? Great. Now, how is it possible for me to not have to type those notes out myself?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I love that. That's like what really great products do, right? Solve a real world problem for a digital process. Give us a bit of a rundown on your background, Ian. So you're 15 years in this space. You came at it via like an academic route. It'd be good to maybe just tell us a little bit about how you made that transition, what excited you about the space and getting out of kind of research into products themselves.
Sure. Well, my persistent dad joke is that I had a job, and as I got older, the only thing that got cooler about me was my job title. So I used to do heavily econometric and statistically based work at a company called the Rand Corporation, public policy, working with the public sector here in the United States, working with the federal government in a number of areas, from the Department of Defense to the Federal Aviation Administration, and heavily working in data. I ended up going back and doing a PhD in political science, actually, because I happen to be really, really interested in the political systems around the world. And during that time, I decided that I wanted to try using text as data in my analyses. So I wanted to look at communication. And at the time, the only real areas that had the capability to do that meant you had to learn Python. So I taught myself a whole lot of Python, taught myself a bunch of the statistical models around using text. And when I finished up the PhD, the job market and I both looked at each other a bit askance, didn't really think I was a great fit, and I wasn't sure that I would be a great academic. So I ended up finding a fantastic job as a data scientist in a startup doing predictions of movements in electricity markets. And from there, I became a machine learning engineer and started building more models and doing a lot more inside infrastructure level work, fielding models, working with startups now across a different number of areas, and then started building teams to solve these problems, all of the time building products based on these. So what do people need? They want to see predictions. They want to see results that come out of models that can understand text and say things like, all right, if you're talking about Boeing, is that the same Boeing that you would think of in terms of airplanes? Or my favorite one is, if you call up all of this data about Apple, is it mistakenly including a candy company in New Hampshire called Apple? And that would happen. And it's just because in data sets, Apple is often Apple Inc., Apple Computers, or just the word Apple. And there's a company out there called Apple. And if you have all of this in one data set and you just join on the word Apple, you're going to get bad data. And then started moving into more of the high-end machine learning. And then once we saw the generative AI revolution, I was like, I want to get back to doing a lot more of what I had been, because at the time I was CTO and working with some amazing people, but really reaching across the spectrum of back-end, front-end implementation, all the infrastructure. And it's fascinating, but my real strength is in building products based on these tools. So I spent a lot more time and focus and went back and started looking really into the generative AI work. So I've done, over the past several years, building products that are based on top of LLMs, that use LLMs as a core part of the modeling tool. And now I've got some opportunities to use them in conjunction with what we think of now as old machine learning or old AI or more traditional machine learning.
Great. And what is your take on what makes really great tech?
Well, I think I've beaten this one into the ground, is it solves a problem. I am more than happy to use an ugly interface and a bad experience if it solved a problem for me. And I think one of the best examples of this is like renting a car. It's terrible to do, but I need to rent a car, and these apps are terrible. So it's not necessarily great tech, but it solves a problem. And, you can see that people aren't spending a whole lot of time there. Now, if you can solve a problem and delight a user, understand and anticipate the issues, understand the ways in which they're going to want to engage, I think that makes something truly wonderful and fun to use, and makes it just a really sticky, really interesting tool. So I don't put a lot of weight on the underpinnings having to be pristine and clean and wonderful and making all of the technology sing, as sometimes a lot of very tried and true developers are going to want to. I want to see from the front end, from the user side, how this works. So building great tech, I think, is a customer understanding and customer obsession. People have, the last thing I'm going to be seen as original is saying that. We can go back way before Steve Jobs. Andrew Carnegie said the same thing. I happen to think that a lot of times now, people who are building tech out of Silicon Valley are building tech for the purpose of just having interesting tech, going like, isn't this a cool thing to do? But it doesn't really solve a problem that you've got. I was really intrigued by a tool a while ago called Poke, that was more of a text-based interaction with LLMs and your email and your scheduling, and thought, oh, this is really interesting. But I really liked the flow. I liked the idea of that. And then they had this wonderful onboarding experience where the thing was like, well, convince me that you're good enough for this. This is pretty cool. Convince me that you are, what are you going to do with it? So you had to have this back and forth and convince the system. And then you had to negotiate the pricing terms. I thought all of this was great.
Wow.
But once you get in, it just falls down. And I bet there's some great developers there, but it doesn't deliver on that promise. So they spent all of their time on this really fun onboarding process, and just nowhere near enough on the underpin or the experience when somebody got behind that wall. It fails a lot. It runs things that you've asked it to stop doing, and that experience just disappears. So no matter how technically innovative that is underneath, I just look at it when it pops up a text, and I'm just like, oh, I got to deal with this, and I need to remember to turn this thing off.
And we briefly had a bit of a chat when we caught up before this around the differences of Google and say versus Apple on that thought of kind of experience. Maybe you can dig into that a little bit.
Oh, sure. Maybe this is when I brought up the point is I have a hard time thinking of any Google app that I love to use. This is one of the world's most valuable companies, and I don't like using any of it. Even something as opening a Google document used to be fine. Now I open it up, and the top half of my documents got, 5 different, here, use this AI tool. Do you want me to start writing for you? Do you need this AI tool? Do you need me to? I'm just now it's just cluttered. And we all made fun of Clippy from Microsoft Word back in the day, but that's all this is. As opposed to Apple, which is obviously very clean. It's nice to use. It's a very simple language. I know what I'm looking at. I open the screen. I know what to click on. I know how to use it. I know whether things are turned on or turned off. It's not got, AI, Apple Intelligence in your face constantly. Apple gets a lot of stick in the market for being behind on AI. I don't think that's the case. I think the most recent deal they made with Google is absolutely genius. Apple doesn't have to win the capital wars to build the next great LLM. If it's got access to the top LLMs and the top systems, they pay for it and they become the vehicle. The top apps in the world are not necessarily Apple apps. I don't use Apple Podcasts. I use Spotify, but I certainly don't use Spotify without my iPhone. So I happen to love what Apple builds because they've had this ethos for so long. It's smooth, it's clear, they know the problem that it's trying to solve. I have issues with Spotify, but all my music's there now and whatnot. But I like using Spotify, and if I weren't as into it, I wouldn't be as picky about it. But as opposed to Google, I just cringe every time I've got to open a Google application of any kind.
That is so true. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because for a moment it seemed like Apple was behind on this AI war, and everybody was hype about AI. Everybody needs that, and I felt that probably if Steve Jobs was alive, he probably would have done the same thing, sit back and watch what's happening. Not making, because a lot of AI stuff added, and especially a lot of companies now trying to force AI into everywhere. Very good example. I think Microsoft, they added AI to Copilot. I mean, not Copilot to everything that they anywhere ahead. Like like you said, open document is there, open this is there
It
in
is
your face.
the like modern day Clippy, isn't it?
It is, but that's why I
It looks
think.
like you're trying to use AI. Can I help you?
No.
And I think Copilot is doing the worst of all of the, I think, AI implementations, and I think Apple is doing the right thing in like sitting back and looking. Okay, we don't want to make it gimmicky. We don't want to make it in your face. We want it to be there when you need it. I personally don't even use AI on iPhone because I don't need it. The Apple Intelligence. But because of that, the phone and the operating system stayed very clean and very
Mhm.
easy to use. I'm not such a big fan of the latest updates with this glass UI, not so much. But
I
I
was
think,
just having that discussion with a coworker. He was a big fan of it. I
yeah.
don't mind it. Like, it's fine. I don't think I needed it. It feels like viewing the world through like a squishy gummy. And I'm like, I didn't need another interface between me and the world. But anyway, I apologize for
No,
interrupting.
no, that's fine. I mean, it's just there was massive discussion when it came out. I didn't think like it added anything to the experience. We didn't probably need that. And I
Nah.
especially was thinking about my mom, and she actually loves using Apple products, and she's 78, which obviously is a great proof that AI has got not AI, Apple has got great interface even for older generations. But I think she will struggle with seeing that glass, the effect and the overlapping items and text specifically. So I'm not a big fan of that. But other than that, I totally agree with you on AI and Apple sort of partnering up with Google rather than trying to create something by themselves. I think they should focus more on what they do the best, which is like very good software and products.
I could not agree more. I look at the landscape, and so much of this, as we talked at the top of the show, is there's this bet on like AI is everything. Wait, aren't you doing AI? And the joke, every company has got to have its AI strategy now, but that is magnified by whatever it takes to get your average company up to the valuation of an Apple or a Microsoft, whatever that X multiplier is. And everybody just expects like you have to be the best at this. Like, why aren't you the best at AI right now? But here's the thing: is Satya Nadella has made this amazing deal with OpenAI, and I know there's some rough edges apparently recently over the past 6 months or so, but they are collecting all of this revenue. The better that OpenAI does, without having to say, we've put in everything into AI and just completely revamped our company around this. So if it doesn't work, we're sunk. Same with Apple. Tim Cook's growth of Apple into, at one point, the most valuable company in the world didn't come because he just isn't smart enough to be like, well, I should be doing something about this AI thing, right? It's like, wait a minute, I have the vehicle to the, I think as Scott Galloway says, the billion most valuable consumers in the world have one of these things in their pockets. I am going to be excruciatingly careful about how things show up in that, especially if it's under my name. Like if it's an app and people don't like an app, everybody knows now. It's like, well, I'm just going to delete the app. They're not going to get rid of the iPhone. If I open up a music tool and it stinks, I'm like, well, I need a new phone now. But if I open up my phone and the AI experience isn't great and Siri is not great, but I try to build something and it's worse than that or doesn't get anywhere, then I have to get rid of the phone, or I've got to, roll the phone back. And that, is a whole technical process that people don't want to go through. I think it's played incredibly well, and he will be rewarded for having made this kind of decision the way he did.
What's the dumbest AI product you've seen get funding?
Get funding. So I feel so bad calling out specific people. I'm not going to say a name. I saw an app, and the best that I could see was that it was a predictive text typer. Like, so it would, you go into Gmail and you're writing, it's like, here, I think you want to finish the sentence this way. It was one that would predict when you needed spaces so that you didn't have to hit the space bar, because this person had done this analysis that most of our keystrokes are repeated keystrokes of the space bar. So saving humans the time to like remove the spacebar typing. I thought that like I really had a hard time understanding the business prospect on that. But to a certain extent, I can't fault them for the fact that like, is this a problem in the world? Like, I don't know that it's a problem, but humans spend a lot of time typing the space bar. The total addressable market, if you want to go to a VC, is every human that types.
There's some logic there, right?
I mean, you can kind of check off if you're not, maybe if you're 3 or 4 drinks in at the networking event, you can kind of see that like, oh, maybe that could be something. But that would easily be the one that I was like, I just had the hardest time. And I remember like trying not to like grill the person on like, what? But that's the first one that comes to mind. I'm sure I've run across crazier things.
Brilliant. And how can founders tell if they're building real AI or just like BS?
So the way to know you're actually like working in BS, everybody should go read this book. It's by Harry Frankfurter. It's called On BS, except BS is spelled out. I don't know if this is a kid-friendly podcast. I'll just say it's on BS, but spell out BS. And he goes through this amazing, and it's incredibly short. I think it may be 40 to 50 pages as quote unquote a book, but it comes in one of these like little wonderfully bound little books. I used to give it out as, new members of my team joined. Is if you don't care about the truth value of your statement, if you just say, you know what, I've built 9 companies. And you don't care whether that's true or not because it doesn't matter at that point. And it's like, well, that's BS. It's because, you might not have, but I've said it. For the founders, I wouldn't worry about whether they're trying to figure out if you're trying to build real BS or if you're trying to build real AI or not. You can probably worry if you're trying to build real BS. If you're trying to build real AI tools, great. But is that the problem that you're facing? Is the best way to solve the problem you're facing right now AI? Sometimes the answer is absolutely yes. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a huge Pittsburgh booster. There's a company out of Pittsburgh called Abridge, and it is a medical, effectively note-taking company. They do a lot more, but one of the things is just this idea of an ambient presence in a room consulting with patients, where it takes notes. It helps fill out those all the, well, we call it paperwork, but it's naturally, form filling in computers. So it automates all of that. Brilliant idea. AI is the single best way to do that because you have to be listening. It has to understand how to turn that into text. It has to understand the forms that it's filling out using that information. That is the best answer for it. If you're building a new CRM tool for some sector, is AI the best tool? Maybe the problem is that everything else is too complicated and I want it to be really, really simple. That's great. AI is not going to be your best answer. Years ago in the big data movement, and I've forgotten who the person is, but somebody put out a tweet that said, most companies think they need machine learning when all they need is clean data and a simple regression. People overcomplicate things too early. So I'm a huge fan of starting simple, starting almost laughably simple, and then starting to complicate from there once you figure out that simple thing cannot answer the problem that you're facing. So, are you building real AI? Maybe. If you're not, is that a problem? Not if customers are coming.
And how do you deal with VCs? Because I think we've interviewed a couple of people in that space, and there is this notion that now 70-80% of all of the VCs want to invest in something that has AI a stamp on it. So how do you deal with that then if you're a founder and you don't necessarily need to use AI, but if you don't get funding?
My advice is to stay away from VC as long as possible. Now, that's not because I don't like VC. I've worked with them. They can be fantastic people. They can be great partners. Not all of them, but that's every industry. One of the things that I see beats out the AI hype is traction. Have you got people who are signed up to use it and are returning to use it? Now, it doesn't have to be a lot of people. What it can't be is I signed up 1,000 people last week and I have no information on whether any of them are coming back. If 10 companies have signed up and they keep coming back for a couple of months, I would take that to a VC long before I would say, well, I've got this, highfalutin idea and AI is going to solve all of healthcare because I've got this one cool little app on an iPhone. That might get some attention because it might be world-beating AI in terms of I can show you all these benchmarks that it beats, OpenAI and Codex and all of these things, and people might want to invest in that. If that's what you're best at, great. I would suggest to those folks, those highly technical folks, go find a business partner in terms of more of a business-oriented founder to understand how that's going to turn into real businesses, because so many of these companies that are getting founded now are not going to exist. And that's the VA function, right? Is to live in a world of what they call power law returns. And I get it, lots of other things follow power laws, not just VC returns, but the idea is they're going to make enough bets that if one of them becomes the 100x bet, it's paid for all of the bets that didn't go right. So the fact that a VC is interested in you has a less signal than if company or if customers are interested in you. The VC being interested in you because you have some AI dust sprinkled over it is just a signal that that person's willing to make you one of their 100 bets, hoping that 1 in 100 will return all the money that they gave you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, what in your experience, how far do you think a founder could get with AI at where it is now in terms of sort of proofing out a concept? What is the point of which they'll then need to sort of like look for some extra support, CTO, that type of thing? How like having your hands on it and using it like daily to build, what's your take with how far you can get to with it now?
I think that if you are building a company now, you should be as small in terms of staff as you possibly can. So if solopreneurs have a hard time getting funded with VCs if that's where you're going. But if you've got a couple of friends that have some good ideas, spend all of your time learning to build that tool, learning with these items. But there are so many tools now, and I'm blanking on some of the names, but I see them listed on LinkedIn every day. They're coming out of YC. They're easily found with a Google search to help you to vet out market ideas, to help you think through potential businesses, to do deep market research. Again, you can go pay Perplexity $20 a month to have almost unlimited deep research on companies and the marketplaces and what works and what doesn't, and go back and forth. Now you can't farm out all of your thinking. You've got to go back and say, like, I don't really believe this estimate. I don't think that's the case. I heard about this other company. Why are you saying that? But those are the conversations you'd have with a good co-founder or with somebody on the business side. And you can get to the point where you can truly vet your business idea up until the point where you need to start talking to real customers. And I don't think you can skip that anymore, but you can do that yourself. You build the plan, build your view of what's going on, then go talk to customers yourself, and then go try to build a small tool yourself that solves that problem. And maybe one of those customers that you talk to will give you a couple of hours to play around with it and give you some feedback. I would go through all of that totally on my own, or with one or two other people, perhaps because you've got like a great idea and you've got some energy amongst you, and one person's more of the, I know this industry really well, I know marketing really well, I know technology really well. Great. But not because any of those things are not items that you can't get from some of these tools, but because there truly is some magic that happens with individuals when they talk. This is the whole thinking process. This is the why. Why am I researching this particular niche? Why am I going to dig down on, well, I want to come up with a company that is 3D printing models for kids in the tween range, and they're going to look like these weird, ugly creatures. And, I'm going to have a 3D Labubu competitor or whatever it's going to be. Why that one? That's you, not the AI. So digging at that is, you've got somebody that knows kids' toys. So you've got somebody that's like, no, I know the 3D printing technology really, really well. We can definitely do that. Great. But that is the magic that happens with co-founders, not because you can't spend that time just hammering at your questions using these AI tools. So I would start there, make the application. I would have in my head that I'm going to be the next billion-dollar company with at most one developer.
Yeah, right. Love that. And so it's like nothing's really changed around that lean startup model, right?
It's still a great model.
Yeah.
The pattern is terrific. You just don't need to expand to more people for even longer.
Yeah. Love that. Amazing. Thanks so much, Ian. It's been absolutely amazing chatting to you. I know that you're kind of on the side running a bit of a consultancy business. You do an advisory for AI and tech. If someone's listening in and they're interested and wanted to kind of get in touch, learn a bit more about you, like what would be the best way to do that? How can you help them? What would you like to kind of add to before we check out?
Well, I appreciate that. And let me, before I even get into the self-aggrandizement, tell you how much fun I've had chatting with both of you. This has been great. You have a fantastic podcast. I am so happy to have been part of it. If people are interested, LinkedIn is a great way to do it. I am Ian P, as in Peter Cook, on pretty much any socials you can find, just at Ian P Cook. So on LinkedIn, it's, in/Ian P Cook. I do some work on the side because I love this. As you can tell, I can talk for a long time, and maybe longer than you were hoping I could talk for. And if people want to have conversations, that's a great place to start. I am at fiercehighways, plural.ai, just because I needed a internet presence of some kind. It's, again, talk about a very minimal viable product. It's just a bare website, but people can reach out that way. They can find me on social, and we can start having those kind of conversations because I absolutely love doing this and love helping people work through it.
Amazing. You've been fantastic. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. We really appreciate it. I absolutely loved conversation with you. You have so much knowledge, and I think you have amazing energy.
Oh, thank you so much. You too. It has been absolutely a pleasure to chat.